Why did the Targaryens keep Aegon's prophecy so secret? If it was so important, why keep it to just the ruler and their heir? Why not tell other people so they could prepare? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. On this channel we dive into George R.R. Martin's world of Ice and Fire in depth, as well as other great fantasy worlds like The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher. Welcome. In the very first episode of House of the Dragon, we get introduced to Aegon's dream. As Viserys recounts it to Rhaenyra, Aegon foresaw the end of the world of men. 'Tis to begin with a terrible winter, gusting out of the distant north. Aegon saw absolute darkness riding on those winds, and whatever dwells within will destroy the world of the living. Serious stuff, and it's changed completely how we viewed Aegon's conquest. He was driven by his dream, which he called the Song of Ice and Fire. That's why he invaded, and that's why he fought so hard to conquer the whole of the Seven Kingdoms, because a Targaryen must sit on the Iron Throne to unite and lead humanity against the cold and the dark. Or at least, that's how he interpreted his dream. We might have thought that this was a show-only thing, but then we got confirmation from Ryan Condal, the showrunner, that actually came from George R.R. Martin, at least the origin of that point. He told us very early on in the room, just as he does, just casually mentioned the fact that Aegon the Conqueror was a dreamer who saw a vision of the White Walkers coming across the wall and sweeping over the land with cold and darkness. So, with his permission, of course, we infused that into the story. So we can reasonably accept that massive reveal as being true in both show and book canon. Aegon and his successors held a prophecy on which the fate of the whole world depended. A small caveat here that Ryan Condal said it was just the origin of the point that they picked up on, but, well, that's all we have to go on. All of which makes it seem very odd that the Targaryens kept it to themselves. Trusting it to be passed down from just ruler to heir seems even more odd, and more than a bit risky. For long periods, there wasn't a clear heir. For example, Charis, an old man at the time, had no heir for probably several months while the Great Council met to choose his successor, and on the show, Rhaenyra took 4 or 5 episodes before telling Jace, in which time she did a few risky things, like travel incognito to enemy-held King's Landing. In the show, that is. That's not in the book. Is that what you would do if you thought you were the only person who knew a world-changing secret? So, why all the secrecy? Why just a ruler and their heir? Why not just tell people? Well, the first answer is that it wasn't always just passed on from ruler to heir. Other Targaryens definitely did know. Jumping back into the history books, we can see that after Aegon the Conqueror passed it on to his heir Aenys, he presumably then passed it on to his heir Aegon, who became known as Aegon the Uncrowned. Aegon the Uncrowned died when his children were still very much babies, maybe a year old, so it's hard to believe he told them and they took it in. But still, it somehow made its way to Charis I, perhaps via his mother Alyssa or some other route. Maybe Aegon the Conqueror's sister-wife Visenya also knew and passed it on to her son Maegor, who told Arya, who told Charis. There are several theories, but however it happened, it wasn't a straightforward transfer from ruler to heir, and no one else. Other Targaryens were told. So, as far as we can tell, the only ruler to heir thing seems to be something that Viserys assumed because he was told by his predecessor Jaehaerys, and not before by his father, say. So, that's the first answer about why this was kept to just rulers and their heirs. It wasn't, initially at least. But all the other people who knew it died out. Targaryens have a shorter life expectancy than most. Second, I think by putting ourselves into his position, we can see why Aegon the Conqueror, and probably also his immediate successors, might have wanted to keep this a secret from the outside world. The Targaryens were very aware when they conquered Westeros that they were from a very different culture and religion to their new subjects. Although they kept up some of their own practices, incest and polygamy, for example, and the whole dragon riding thing kept them different, they did take quite a few steps to fit in. They styled themselves as House Targaryen in the Westerosi fashion, and adopted a sigil, the three-headed dragon, something they'd never needed before. And most importantly, Aegon chose to have himself crowned by the High Septon, in the Faith of the Seven, in the Starry Sept. Although as the story of A Song of Ice and Fire starts, the faith seems rather benign, a state religion, this was very much not the case in the years after the conquest. High septons decried Targaryen kings as abominations. Armies of poor fellows gathered and besieged castles and towns, hunting down kings. It's no exaggeration to say that the Faith of the Seven was the single biggest threat to Targaryen rule in its early years. And the followers of the Faith of the Seven at the time really believed. If Aegon had said he was ruling them because he'd had a vision from who knows where, but definitely not from the Seven, the cries of heretic would have only grown louder. And it's not just the faith. Hundreds of thousands of people, maybe even millions, lost their livelihoods, loved ones, homes, and so much more during the conquest and its aftermath. Just in terms of what we might today call message management, telling those people that it was all because of a bad dream about some monsters coming from the north, or that their new overlords alone were capable of saving humanity from a rather vague threat that will come sometime in the wintertime, might not go down well. And the longer the Targaryens left it to reveal this motive, the less believable or sane it would sound. Okay, so you killed thousands of people in order to save the continent from a threat you saw in a dream. But where is this threat? Years passed, decades, centuries. On a basic human level, you can understand the Targaryens not saying anything. And thinking about it, the time element is not unimportant here for the Targaryens either. Aegon may well have believed that his dream would come true in his lifetime, but it didn't. And then his dream got passed down from generation to generation with no hint that anything was happening, that the prophecy would ever prove true. Can we blame Targaryens generations later for perhaps not believing in it so strongly as Aegon seems to have? I think not. On the show, when Rhaenyra passes on the prophecy to Jace, she admits that at first she didn't really believe it herself, and basically further admits that today she only believes it because it would make the war and suffering to come worthwhile. It feels more like something she clings onto for comfort, rather than an absolute belief in the truth of it. All of which leads us to a rather fluid, but I think convincing set of reasons why the Targaryens kept Aegon's dream to themselves for so long. To start with, Aegon probably didn't just keep it to himself and his heir. Many in the fandom assume he must have told his sister wives about it, so they supported him in the invasion, and it's clear from looking at the histories that at least some of his successors didn't stick to a strict ruler and heir rule, or else Charis would never have learned of it himself. But Aegon and his successors also had very good reason not to spread it much further either. The Faith of the Seven were the biggest single threat to the unity of the Seven Kingdoms, and the Faith viewed the Targaryens with great suspicion already. When you think about it, the idea that this prophecy should only be passed down from ruler to heir probably came in through Viserys or Jaehaerys, who both lived in relatively peaceful times in which the prophecy won't have felt quite so urgent. As we saw on the show, Viserys certainly seems to have felt confident enough not to tell his brother and assumed heir Daemon for a couple of years before he officially picked Rhaenyra as his heir, and Rhaenyra took her time in telling Jace. Although we can watch the show knowing that this prophecy is important, the whole book series is named after Aegon the Conqueror's vision, at the time they didn't know that. They just knew that there was a prophecy passed down from generation to generation that justified them staying in power. One that, if they told other people about, would probably mark them down as a little bit crazy. But to them, it was comforting and challenging, and justified them being in the most privileged and powerful position in the continent. Why would they tell anyone else? If you'd like to see more videos like this about George R.R. Martin's world of Ice and Fire, there's a link to my playlist on the left of your screen. Or if you'd like to support this channel, thank you. There's a link on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.